My name's Lea Cummings, and I do all sorts of kind of artistic stuff. I make films and do lots of music, sound stuff, do lots of performances, and do visual art stuff as well. And the main kind of themes that I'm interested in are things like distortion and noise, and pushing kind of the limits of things, and in various ways. And I think most of the things that I do have that as the kind of basic level of the starting point of what they're about. Drawings I've been working on for a little while now are very detailed and patterned, and lots of kind of jarring colours and that kind of thing. I just tend to like things that are kind of a little bit difficult in some ways. That's the kind of sense that in some ways you kind of have to earn your place in it, in that sense, so they kind of put some people off because they're too detailed or too colourful, or I know some people can't look at them for too long because it makes them uncomfortable or gives them a headache or something like that. But I don't set out to make things necessarily that way, it's just the way it turns out. But yeah, so I spend a lot of time with them, they take a long time, and they just flow really. So some of them, I don't plan out the pattern beforehand, or I don't plan anything. Basically, I start with a blank sheet of paper and a table of pens, and I just see what happens. So they have that kind of flow to them, but some of them kind of look a bit disjointed in that sense too, because they are what they are really, and that's the important thing about them, is that they just do what they do in that way. So the detail bit's important. I kind of tend to like doing detailed things. Whenever I go into, there's something very powerful about kind of churches that have so much artwork everywhere, and there's that kind of overload sense, and that sense of time spent as well. And I think the drawings that I've been doing kind of relate to that in that sense as well, in terms of you can tell that a certain amount of time's been put into them. There's no everything that's been done for those drawings is in the drawing in that sense, so there's no workings, or there's no plannings, or there's no sketchbooks of trying things out. It's all on the sheet of paper. So I kind of like the idea of that. A lot of the sound that I do has a certain amount of spontaneity to it, which is the way I like to work. And the drawings are spontaneous too, but in a more slower way, so it's more drawn out. So it's not like throwing a pot of paint against a canvas and then it's finished. It all happens in a second. It's like, but it has the same spirit of that, in that sense of that it's not thought about. So it's like slow improvisation in that sense. I think the head state that I'm in when I'm making any kind of work massively affects the outcomes of that, and I think also the type of thing that I'm doing can also make a difference to how I'm feeling too in that way. But doing any kind of art stuff, there are aspects to it that are kind of the enjoyable bits in that sense, where you're actually doing the creative stuff, but then if you're kind of trying to kind of get yourself out into the world in that sense too, there are kind of aspects to it that aren't that artistic really, that are more kind of stuff that you just have to do really, So I try and keep the actual creative stuff in that kind of head state of just letting it flow and not thinking too much about what it is, and then thinking about the context of it later, and how to frame it, and how to think about what it is and why it is, rather than having a starting point of it trying to be something and then working towards that. So it's more instinctive, it's more subconscious in that sense. So in terms of the drawings and stuff, just working on those drawings tends to make me kind of relaxed, and it plays with time too, and I generally feel good doing that in that sense. That's not the reason that I do it, but it does. I've noticed the last few weeks where I've not been doing the drawings, I've been concentrating on more like logistics of things. I've really missed doing those drawings, and even though there's a lot to do just now, and there's other things I should be doing rather than drawing. Yesterday I started one of the other drawings, and I had a really nice couple of hours yesterday just drawing, and I kind of forgot about everything else, and in some ways that's kind of the point of them. And I think when work's made that way, it seems to capture that kind of essence somehow, and then I think when other people observe them or interact with them, that feeling's kind of there somehow in them. Whereas I think if your starting point was trying to create those kind of feelings, it wouldn't be quite as successful somehow. It's like that kind of magic element, that kind of magic spark that art has sometimes. Well, I think what happens when you work on that level of the subconscious and you just let things flow, and you set up an environment where you're able to do that, I think you access like a deeper level of what it means to be human on a deeper level kind of thing. I think that technology changes and the world changes or kind of around people almost, but deep down on the basic human level, human beings are the same as they were however many years ago. And I think there's something really interesting about tapping into that energy field of human beings, that spark that makes people human. Because when I started doing those drawings, I didn't think about any of these things at all. I just did them, and I kind of found it interesting afterwards that I seem to keep seeing things in books or on TV or whatever, thinking, well, that looks very similar to kind of my stuff, and I'd hear people saying, oh, that's kind of, your stuff's influenced by Aboriginal things or Native American things, and thinking, well, that's kind of interesting because it isn't consciously influenced. I've not kind of studied these things and thought, right, I'm going to start making some visual art that references these things. It wasn't like that. I just did it, and I think there's something very powerful about that. And I think I like the thing about human beings having kind of there's like two views in that sense. There's the one that kind of processes information, because there's so much information going in our five senses, and it takes your system a certain amount of time to process that. And it's through experiments with playing with these kind of things, it's worked out. It's like we're basically between a half a second and 1.5 seconds behind time, because it takes us that long to process. So in a sense, we're always one step behind time. But then sometimes if things happen, like you pull boiling water on your hand, or you're in an emergency situation, what happens is the inner you takes over to save you, because if you use the outer you to kind of process what's going on, by the time you processed it, you'd be dead or burned or whatever. So I like the idea of trying to get into the headspace and create things that come from that deeper human thing, rather than problem solving or processing information in that sense. And I think possibly civilizations and peoples in the past that had less information to process, and where life wasn't framed as like a competition and the survival of the fittest and these things, so you're constantly trying to think ahead of the person because it's like a race or whatever. I think it was easy to maybe access that way of being in a creative way. So in a lot of ways I'm trying to keep a little bubble around that, and not because when I'm in that bubble and creating, I don't worry about things, and I don't think about things, and I just let my mind wander. I don't really think about anything. But it's also not that these things are just happening, and I'm guided by something in that sense either. I'm making choices about what goes where and that kind of thing, but I'm not thinking about it really. Working on the project for Unlimited has been really good. It's been really interesting to work in a different way in that sense too. I always, in terms of a longer term thing, I'm always working to a deadline in some sense. Even when I'm doing the drawings, I'm always thinking about, and like somewhere in the back of my mind, I always have something coming up in terms of some kind of exhibition or something that they can be used for in that way. I'm not thinking about that while I'm doing it, but it is there in that sense. And I guess with the Unlimited project, it's just a little bit more defined that in terms of, I kind of set out a plan when I started with Unlimited stuff about what I was going to do each month and doing all that kind of thing, which was more about the process of having to take the boxes rather than actually doing it, because whereas in the past I would have really worried about that, because I used to kind of have that worry about things being right in that sense, but I didn't worry about it this time, because the whole point is that it doesn't necessarily have to be what I actually do in that way, so it's quite flexible. They have been good and limited, and reiterate the point that it is what you want it to be, which is really important. So when I wrote out the plan, I knew full well that I probably wasn't going to follow it, but that didn't matter, because then you can talk about why you didn't follow it. It's that kind of learning how to do that process of art rather than just do it yourself in that sense. So that interaction with other people and other organisations, in some ways, kind of different for me. I've had to do that with, dealing with record labels and promoters, doing gigs and that kind of thing in a sense anyway. But I think probably the biggest difference, I think, with the Unlimited stuff is that it's an ambitious thing that I'm doing here, and it has a big scale to it in terms of it actually includes a lot of what I've done so far and I'm interested in, but it puts it all into a context of something in that sense. So it's almost like everything I've been working at over the years is kind of going to work towards this, it feels like. And a lot of things I've done in the past that I've thought about now, and thought about why I've done them and why I've enjoyed them and why they've worked and why they haven't, they all seem to be related. They all seem to be pulling into this spiral thing of this one piece, which is really interesting. So I've been contextualising things I haven't thought about before through the lens of this piece, and it's surprising how it all works. So that's really interesting. So that's kind of been different too. So I've basically taken all the stuff that I liked, that I've done and that I find important about it, and trying to frame it in a different kind of way. So it'll be interesting to see how it turns out.